We are just 4 days out from the CNN presidential debate, and a new Rasmussen national poll reveals former President Trump is now leading President Biden by 10 points, as Biden is hunkering down at Camp David to prepare for the first face-off of the year. Maria spoke with former President Trump's son, Eric, about this yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures. Listen.
It's pretty telling of a president who has to go to Camp David in the middle of the woods and lock himself effectively in a bunker for an 8-day period of time because his policies are so bad that he has to figure out some way to polish them up and try and sugarcoat them and try and frame them with all of his top advisors. And I can tell you my father is not doing that. My father is on the right side of these issues, and 10 days or 8 days in the woods in Camp David to try and explain yourself to the American people. I'm not exactly sure if that's if that's a big showing of confidence.
Meanwhile, some Senate Republicans are urging former President Trump to avoid the mistakes that he made during the 2020 debates, suggesting that Trump doesn't need to be overly aggressive and shouldn't badger or interrupt Biden. Let's bring in Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett. He's a member of the House Oversight, Foreign Affairs, and Transportation Committees. Congressman, good morning to you. And in particular, I want to bring up this comment that came from Senator John Thune, who, by the way, would like to be leader next year if the Senate is taken back by the GOP. He says basically, quote, don't take the bait. And one of the things that former President Trump got hit with 4 years ago was when he said that the Proud Boys should stand back and stand by. Those comments is what can get run with and misinterpreted. What would you say?
Well, the difference between Donald Trump and the last few presidents we've had, he doesn't run something by the United Nations or some think tank before he puts it out. He just lets it fly in his New York bravado. And I think America is tired of all the BS that you're getting from this current White House, and they want some straight talk. And President Trump delivers that. I think the issues are pretty evident. Y'all went through them pretty well. The talking points, it's the border. I mean, these folks are getting murdered. They've unloaded their prisons and their mental health institutes on us, and we're seeing the results of a non-existent border policy. Eric Trump's right. The president has been mentally absent from the White House. And in the last 7 or 8 days, he's physically absent from the White House. He's just gone underground, and Trump's not going to need that. But I do hope that, and I expressed this to President Trump at our conference meeting that he met with us a couple of weeks ago. I said, Mr. President, you're great at telling us what's wrong with this country, and we've seen it, and you're even better at telling us how to fix it, because Americans are suffering and they're hurting. And I hope he concentrates on some of those things and what he can do to improve this economy.
Okay,
average citizens paying
thank you for bringing that up.
$600 more out a week.
Thank you for bringing that up, because it's going to be the topics that affect the wallets of Americans. It is housing, it is inflation, and it is the economy, the gig economy. We're seeing people getting 2 and 3 jobs. They're driving an Uber and they're working down the street at their local pharmacy, for instance. But another issue that is likely going to come up, and that would be tax policy. And if the CNN presidential debate is focused on policy, then one of the things, and this is coming from Senator Mark Warner, they're talking about 2025 when the Trump tax cuts expire, and their plan, if they can keep hold of the Senate, say that President Biden does get elected, I mean, they're talking about a tax strategy that would be almost detrimental to the average American. Those conversations that are going to be had on Thursday are also conversations that are going down ballot for you and your colleagues that are trying to keep control of the House. How do you message that, Congressman?
Well, I think President Trump's done it very well. This doing away with the tax on tips. That hits the average American, working American every day that is out there. The single mom who's trying to just bust it, like you said, those people working 2 or 3 jobs, and then they have to pay taxes on their tips. And he realizes that every waiter or waitress is going to have, it's kind of like a barber. Eventually, you're going to run into them somewhere down the line. And I think that was a genius stroke. But it also plays into the fact that he is listening to what Americans are saying. He got that idea, he told us, from a waitress who just told him that. And he thought that was a great idea. And I think that also shows that these senators, they deal in these platitudes. They run every 6 years. they don't really pay much attention until election year. In the House, we run every 2 years, and I can tell you it's the basics that are hitting people right now. It's the fact they are paying $600 more a month. Some people are telling me they're paying $1,200 more a month out of pocket just to survive, and that's working families, and that just goes down the line. And you talk about down ballot. I think that this is going to be across the board, and I've encouraged the folks to bring up these basic things that are hitting Americans, because that's where it's at. And President Trump understands that, and Joe Biden does not understand that. I mean, he hasn't paid taxes on $20 million through his crime family that has flowed through different avenues. So I would hope that he just sticks with the basics.
Well, we'll have to see. Again, we expect these are things that we're going to be hearing come Thursday. But what are the things about messaging and communications? Because many administration officials are fanning across the country this week. They're out there to convince the American people that Bidenomics is working. You've got Yellen going, and Buttigieg, and of course Harris. But one thing that the Biden administration has just done, and it's created some controversy, they've hired Tyler Cherry for a communications role inside the White House. So this is a former Interior Department communications director who's now under fire for past tweets. He called for immigration and customs enforcement to be abolished. The modern day police system is a direct evolution of slave patrols and lynch mobs. So he responds on X, and he says past social media posts from when I was younger do not reflect my current views, period. I support this administration's agenda and will continue my communications work focused on our climate and environmental policies. Congressman, another interesting hire at the White House.
Yeah, it's a DEI thing, ma'am. They needed to check the box. I guess they just needed a radical transgender white male. Maybe that was what they were trying to hit. But I think this goes back to one of my original points that I've made. And the last guy, the bald-headed guy that was wearing the dress, got caught stealing stuff in airports not once but twice, maybe more. I think this falls in that same avenue. This is because this president has some 25-year-old boy, I would call him, with a man bun that is advising him, that has his ear, because they realize they have lost every demographic, or they're losing. I had lunch with a Hispanic, very successful Hispanic man and his wife, big Trump fans. I have some friends that are black, big Trump fans. And it defies the demographics. Now, here's what he's trying to do. He's trying to get his crazy, radical left-wing base. And that's why they keep doing these crazy, radical things, because they've lost every other demographic and they're losing. And they know if they don't have that hard left at the polls, and they're very frustrated now because of his Middle Eastern policies, with Gaza and all that, he knows he can't. He's dead. They're dead in the water all the way down the ballot, and it's going to affect Congress, the Senate, everything. That's why you're seeing him embrace, if you will, this hard left theology that is really just wrecking our country. It's wrecking the base of our country. It destroys families and children alike.
Right. No, we've talked about it this morning. Real quick before you go, I don't have a lot of time with you, but the former president's classified documents case comes back to Florida court today, and the judge is going to hear arguments over the Trump team's motion to dismiss the case. I want to get quickly your thoughts on this. Basically, Trump's attorneys are saying that special counsel Jack Smith was illegally appointed to the case because he was a private citizen at the time, and the Smith's team is asking the judge to adjust Trump's release conditions. They want to bar Trump, get this, from speaking publicly about the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. They're focusing on his comments about the agency's use of force. Real quick, your thoughts on all of this, sir.
It's a complete violation of his First Amendment rights. What if Joe Biden is critical of him during the debate over this? So he's in violation of the court if he doesn't respond. This is election manipulation at its worst, because it's coming from our courts. They have completely violated their oaths of office. I say follow the money. It won't come out this year, I'm sure, but next year and the ones following, people are going to start talking, and you're going to find out how this was orchestrated. And this is more of a deep state type situation. I mean, you have 51 intelligence officers telling us that that Hunter Biden's computer was Russian collusion. This is all part of the deep state. These people, they sit around and laugh and joke, and they manipulate the entire system, and America is fed up. And that's why Donald J. Trump will be the next president of the United States.
Congressman, thank you very much.